Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Bridger of Worlds podcast. I'm your host, Ioannis Kokinos. Thank you so much for joining me. If you're on YouTube watching, thank you for tuning in. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, thank you for tuning in as well. Hi, everybody. Once again, I'm popping in here today because I've pre-recorded this next episode that you're about to watch / listen to. And I've actually been working on something very exciting, and that is the first men's retreat that I am hosting this summer in June on the island of Ikaria, Greece. So I just want to put this in here because registration is now open. If you're on YouTube watching, you can find all the information down on the description below. And if you're on one of the podcast platforms, you can find the website on the podcast footer. So this is a men's retreat focusing on masculine embodiment. It's a 5-day, fully immersive experience in the Greek island wilderness. For those of you that have been following me, you know that I've traveled to Skiathos, to Corfu, to Crete. I've been living on Rhodes, and I've been communing with these islands and with the Greek wilderness very intentionally. So now this is a medicine I want to offer and open up the space to share with my brothers. So if this is at all speaking to you, please sign up. I'd love to see you over there. It's going to be maximum 16 men. I am keeping the group small because I want to preserve the depth and the integrity of the container. And it'll be full day immersive work as far as I said, masculine embodiment is concerned. Think masculine, feminine energetics, aspecting shadow work, group circle, group witnessing, breath work, meditation, grounding exercises, primal energy expression and embodiment. It's going to be wild. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be charged. And I hope to see you there. Thank you. So today there are two things I want to talk about, and I'm going to connect them. I want to talk about masculine embodiment. That's a subtitle of my podcast, Bridger of Worlds, Masculine Embodiment, Spiritual Awakening podcast. And I want to talk about archetypal fire. I want to talk about fire from like the masculine perspective / expression. We're going to bring it into the body. That's what I mean by masculine embodiment. I've been mentioning it, many episodes, especially the homoeroticism series, as far as how important it is for men to reconnect to their bodies, whether it's solo or within masculine containers, men's groups, men's work, etc. Masculine embodiment means to embody masculinity, and in the word embody, we have the word body. And the body is really like the gateway to our spiritual potential, our healing potential. I talk about the body in many episodes, but today I want to elaborate on it. I want to elaborate upon masculine embodiment and also bring fire into the conversation, archetypal fire, right? So just like we can talk about deities and gods and goddesses, all these threads of consciousness as archetypes and to work with their energy, we can also, of course, work with the archetypal elements. And I say archetypal because they're not actually elements. And by elements here, I am referencing earth, water, fire, and air. These are elements according to the alchemical tradition, or the field of holistic healing and health, even philosophy. So we say like the earth element, the fire element, and so on and so forth, but they're not actually elements. They're all compounds except fire, which is plasma, but they are archetypes. They're symbols that we can most definitely work with. And I do believe like the core ingredient, the foundational component of masculine embodiment is fire, is working with fire, learning how to work with fire. All elements are important, of course, But fire is very special. Fire is quite unique in the sense that it is the sole element that um, transmutes one form into another. Water does so as well. Water does it through like dissolving and dilution. Water's what holds for gestation and rebirth. Symbolically speaking, water and fire are opposites, right? We know that literally, like water puts out fire, and with enough fire and a little amount of water, fire can cause evaporation of water or steam, right? So, um, but they are actually opposites that complement one another. So I want to talk about fire from like the masculine perspective, as far as like the masculine expression of fire is concerned. So as always, when we're talking about polarities, when we're talking about the masculine, it's the outward, external expression or experience, the active, penetrative force, and the feminine is the inward or internal experience, the passive, receptive force. So fire is, of course, gender neutral. In the alchemical tradition, fire is masculine and water is feminine. We see this through the human body as well, biology, because the womb, the feminine womb, is where the water is that permits gestation and birth to occur. And the seed that the masculine carries, which again is a symbol through semen, through his cock, that is represented by fire. So the act of penetrating, the act of, piercing through, the act of the willful force of the phallus, the penis, the erect cock, is fire. Now, of course, arousal is associated with fire as well, and this pertains to everybody. So we can also, on the flip side, see feminine fire, the expression of feminine fire. And as a symbol, we can very much parallel this to Shakti. Kundalini Shakti is part of Hindu Tantrism, where this fire, this serpentine fire, is known to be feminine as part of the teachings. And we are meant to raise this serpent fire through our chakras, our energy centers, the feminine life force that is to meet and reunite with Shiva up here in the crown chakra, the spiritual force. So there is feminine fire, or rather feminine expression of fire, and masculine expression of fire. But of course, for the sake of today's episode, we're going to talk about the masculine expression of fire, which is the outward experience, and also the containment of fire, right? Because the masculine, as far as the polarity is concerned, is about containment and holding the fire, which I've talked about in quite a few episodes. And this is really, as I said, the core ingredient or the foundational component of masculine embodiment. When we want to feel more masculine and we want to embody masculinity, we start with our body and we start with our inner fire. Now, this fire does symbolically or energetically originate at the base of the spine, the perineum. So this is our bottom root chakra, which is ruled by the earth element as part of Hindu Tantrism. It's not ruled by the fire element because the fire element is ruled by the solar plexus. And this is relevant because our first, experience with life and coming into the earth, coming into physical form, is first and foremost about surviving and grounding and getting to know the material experience. Fire and earth are also connected and very symbolically synergistic, because if we look at, let's say, Stoic philosophy from ancient Greece, what the Hindu tantrics call feminine Shakti, which is the fire serpent that begins at the root chakra, which is the earth element. So we have that correlation there between fire and earth. In Stoic philosophy of ancient Greece, this was known as the spermatikos logos, which spoke to the potential of life manifesting from the seed in question. So that seed is, of course, represented through the nature world, right? All the flora and fauna begin with seeds. And then, of course, the masculine seed, whether animals or human species, right? That is the spermatikos logos. We see the word sperm in spermatikos, and then the logos in a philosophy, in ancient Greek philosophy, is the potential of life manifesting and coming into form, coming into some form of order, organization, because that is what the logos means. Logos also means reason, the reason for life, which is the patterns and all of the, different infinite expressions of life coming together and working together in harmony. So words like harmony, reason, patterns, organization, order, these are all synonyms. And we actually also have all these references in Christology, because the Logos is also associated with Jesus Christ. But the Logos' origin is actually from Platonic philosophy, and it comes from the spermatikos Logos, which is, again, the fire, the seed fire, located inside the earth. So it's interesting because we're talking about the same elements, but let's say the Hindu tantrics perceive this as feminine, and then the Stoic philosophers of ancient Greece perceive this as masculine. It's very interesting, and I'm just going to say like a little side note here, because I see like online there's a lot of people for speaking and expressing, spirituality through duality and polarities, and then others are saying that it's wrong, or we should not be, assigning gender to expressions of spirituality or life. Everything came from oneness, right? So when we're talking about spirituality, we're talking about oneness, which is gender neutral, right? There's no gender when we're talking about oneness, because everything is one. But we are here to play as human beings. We're here to play this game of duality. And it is very helpful to know and name certain aspects of life, because yes, we're quote unquote supposed to transcend or, go beyond duality to realize oneness. It is through duality that we get there. And duality, in a sense, I guess, has been demonized depending on like what religious doctrine you're looking at, what spiritual teaching you're looking at. It's always about like the non-dual and the absolute and oneness. That is the, let's say, quote unquote spiritual goal or purpose that we're here to experience, but it is through duality that we get there. So that's my 2 cents. And just because of this example, right, we're talking about the exact same things of, let's say, fire and earth and their connection. We could see that it can be feminine, but it can also be masculine. Because when we're talking about the feminine and the masculine, they are, yes, opposites, but they are complements. And if we want to visualize this, one of the best visuals is actually the Tao symbol of Taoism, the yin and the yang, right? So we have the white portion with the black dot. We have the black portion with the white dot. So we cannot solely speak of the feminine and solely speak of the masculine, because they are always like in conversation. They're always bouncing off of each other. We take away the masculine, we take away the feminine, and vice versa. So I wanted to put this as a little parenthesis here, because, even when we're talking about masculine embodiment and we're talking about masculine fire, the feminine is always around, right? Because symbolically, the feminine, as always, as I keep saying, is the shifts of life, the changes of life, whereas the masculine is the constant of life, is the stationary of life. So the Hindu tantrics paint this beautifully, right? Shakti is the dance, is the fluctuating life force that courses through our body, which promotes the changes and the shifts of everything, within us, with outside of us. And Shiva is the absolute, is the stationary, is the constant that witnesses it all without judgment. So let's say even when we're working with masculine fire, the expression of masculine fire, and we're working with our inner fire, whether we're looking at it from the Hindu tantric perspective, which is the feminine life force, or Stoic philosophy, which is the seed pattern, the seed logos, the spermatikos logos, we're still talking about the creative slash transmutational expression of fire, because that's what fire is vibrationally, and how we can work with it at the archetypal level. Because the only way to quote unquote experience ego death and move beyond just our, perception of this reality and our who we are and what our name is, our history, and just the material slash physical experience, is to move through ego death, which happens at the solar plexus chakra, which is the fire chakra. And the fire chakra is also the will center. It's a very masculine chakra because it's from here, it's from our solar plexus that we will out into life. So the chakra system is like very complex, and I've talked about it in quite a few episodes. I'm not going to get it all in today's episode, but I want to speak specifically to fire and, where symbolically it is located inside our body. So when we are doing masculine embodiment work, whether we're solo or in men's groups or, we're in retreats, a lot of the times masculine embodiment will incorporate grounding first and foremost, right? Because as men, we want to feel that we are connected to the earth and to our bodies in order to build and stoke that fire, because it is only when we are grounded that we can organize, quote unquote, the fire. It doesn't feel as chaotic. And this doesn't mean that it won't cause some form of transmutational experience or transformative cathartic situation or experience, but it won't feel like we're losing ourselves within that experience, because we are first and foremost grounded and connected to our body. So the most important way we can start grounding is by planting our feet into the earth, bending our knees a little bit, and becoming aware of our body, becoming aware of our breath. And then the breath, of course, is such a pivotal piece to working with the fire, which I think I will leave for another episode. Depends how long this episode is going to go for. So I've talked about the breath before and its connection to fire, but really becoming aware of our breath and feeling our feet planted to the earth is grounding like 101. And then obviously there are more exercises and there are also other ways to embody more. But by building the fire through grounding is how we can learn to contain the fire better and really start to tap into our animal nature, into our beast mode, because that is what the fire will do. Our fire arises from our root chakra, which is our most quote unquote animal chakra. The lower the chakras are, the more animalistic they are, and the higher the chakras are, the more spiritual they are, right? So we have the crown chakra up here at the top of our head, which is the seventh main chakra. We have more than seven, but the seven main chakras are more than enough to work with in order to lead a very healthy and vital and beautiful life. But in order to like get here, right, we need to start from the bottom, which is the most animalistic part of us. So it can feel very chaotic, it can feel very volatile, it can feel very aggressive, it can feel very explosive, right? That all depends on what type of trauma is stored there, right? Because, somatically, the level of the body, we're talking about the space between the anus and the sex organs of both men and women, right? So that center, let's say the perineum, is where a lot of deep embedded trauma is stored. And because we, of course, learn from very early on, very early ages, to feel shame about this part of our body, to feel, fear, whatever. Just it's more denied, it's more rejected, right? It's where we shit and piss from. So we don't really want to think about it. We don't really want to hold any awareness around these parts of our bodies. But it's our body, and we shit and piss for a reason, because if we weren't shitting and pissing, we'd actually cease to exist. So, as disgusting and uncomfortable as these processes are, they're part of our humanity, they're part of our animal nature, they're part of keeping us healthy and vital. And, nobody wants to talk about shit and urine, and that's not what I'm here to talk about today. But when we're, you know, working with the root chakra, we're working at the level of the perineum, a lot of shame and fear and, survival traumas can be stored there, and sexual, of course, right? Because that is where our creative life force arises from, and our creative life force is our sexual energy. So to learn how to contain that, or to even let ourselves surrender to that, right? Because this life force is very powerful. It's the God force, it's the energy of the universe. It is what has created everything. It's what's created us. This is why we're able to create life. We're able to create babies and human life through our sex organs and our creative slash sexual slash erotic energy. So depending on the magnitude of trauma, a lot can come out, a lot can, express very erratically and chaotically if the trauma hasn't been processed. It's just denied emotion, just denied feeling that's stuck there, and it's very unconscious, right? So according to Anodea Judith, who's a Jungian psychoanalyst and somatic therapist, our root chakra starts to develop from our time inside the womb, when we're in our mother's womb, all the way till about 6 months to 12 months of age. So imagine things happening while we're in our mother's womb, when we're not even a year old, right? Things happening, stuff happens, traumatic things happen, and that gets stored at the level of the root chakra. And then, of course, that builds. And as we go older, the other chakras are meant to develop, but the root is the foundation, root is the base. So if we have a faulty base, if we have a faulty foundation, this, of course, will affect the rest of the structure. Now, it doesn't mean that because maybe you had a very tough and traumatic start to your life that you're doomed, right? That's not at all what this means. It's just that there'll be a lot more shadow material to work with. And when we're talking about masculine embodiment and we want to reconnect to our body and to reconnect to our fire, this is really where we have to go, because fire, as I said, symbolically will allow the rebirth process to occur. And this happens at the level of the solar plexus, which is our will center, which is one of the masculine chakras. It's one of the masculine energy centers. And then once we do realize some form of, separation from materiality and like the physical experience, and we realize we're not just physical beings, that we're something else, this is when we start to go higher than the solar plexus, because everybody in some way, shape, or form has come up to the solar plexus energetically. And this is where the ego is, right? Doesn't mean because the ego resides at the solar plexus that it's a bad place to be, right? We do need our ego no matter how spiritual we become. It's just that we'll have to learn that the ego doesn't take the reins, and that the ego just comes along for the ride. So this is why, in men's work and when we're doing somatic work, as far as masculine embodiment is concerned, we see a lot of stomping that comes through. We really see like the warrior coming through. We hear a lot of roaring. We start to beat our chests, right? This is all primal. This is all instinctual. It's ancestral. To connect to our root chakra is to connect to our lineages as well. So as I've been mentioning in previous episodes, and how pivotal it is to connect to, our male ancestry, especially even if we have not had any male elders to hold this kind of space for us, because they didn't have that kind of space held for them, right? So this trauma gets passed on from one man to the next until somebody decides to heal that trauma. And sometimes we don't have the community, sometimes we don't have the spaces. So we will we will ultimately need to learn how to do this for ourselves, and yes, show up for each other in community, but also learn how to show up for ourselves. And sometimes we need to connect to our male elders. We need to connect to our male ancestors. And depending on how spiritual you are, or how much you've tapped into your, mystic, it doesn't mean you need to hold a meditation and try and connect to your male ancestors, but just knowing that, let's say at the level of the root chakra, where you want to work with your fire and you want to work with your body, the regurgitated traumas, the traumas that were not healed in the bloodlines, especially as far as like masculinity is concerned, will be stored there, because the root is our survival center. Our root is the energy center that is most connected to like the earthly experience. And the most potent ways to connect our root chakra is, yes, let's say, standing barefoot, planting our feet on the earth, but also dancing, bending our knees, getting low to the earth. A lot of the ancestral rites, a lot of ways how our ancestors used to, pray and connect to the spiritual planes and to their ancestors was through dance, because dancing is very grounding. Dancing will ground and also elevate us at the very same time, right? So think of ecstatic dance, which I've talked about in previous episodes. When we're dancing and we're going beyond ourselves, we're like when we're in like an ecstatic frenzy from pure joy and bliss, right? That is connecting with oneness, that is connecting with the creator, with spiritual energy. And we're doing that through our body. We're doing that through grounding, right? Through dancing. We need to do something with our feet. We need to hit our feet on the earth. We need to move our hips. We need to shake our hips. We need to move our knees in order to dance. And that is all root chakra related. Another powerful way is drumming. Drumming is connected to the heartbeat, right? Like the first sound we hear in our lifetime is the sound of our mother's heartbeat, right? So like that drum beat is a very primal activation. It's our first memory of sound when we're in our mother's womb and hearing her heartbeat. So drumming can also be very root chakra resonating and connective. And then, of course, sexual activation, erotic activation, let's say, right? So whether solo or partnered, when we are activating or arousing ourselves erotically, that is very much root chakra activating as well. And because erotic energy holds the energy of life, death, and rebirth, remember Eros and Thanatos, life and death, creation and destruction, this will promote, masculine embodiment potentially the most when integrated and harnessed consciously, because we are meant to work with our sexual energy. We're meant to work with our erotic energy. That is the sexual fire that we must work with in order to realize our spiritual potential. And that's not a doctrine that has been accepted or spread, or it's not a message that we've learned growing up, most of us anyway, because it originates from the level of the root chakra. And as I said, it's the most animalistic chakra. It's the most primal part of us that gets the most denied and the most rejected. But it is the foundation. It's the base that holds the whole structure up. No matter how spiritual we want to feel and become, no matter how much love we want to feel, and, connected to God and connected to those around us, if there's no base, there's no foundation to hold that, then that potential for love and even spiritual unity cannot happen. We cannot build a house without laying the groundwork first. We cannot build anything without having a base first. And this is how we can start to paint the picture of masculine embodiment, feminine embodiment too, right? This work is for men and women, but for the sake of today's episode and this podcast, of course, I'm speaking to the men. And I think because the root chakra is so tied and connected to the ancestral piece and to those lineages and to our male ancestors that were the hunters, the warriors, the space holders for rites of passages. There's a lot of power that can come through, a lot of energy, a lot of primal power that can come through. And that can feel scary because we've not grown up in this lifetime to be in that kind of energy in a safe way. And it is so important to allow ourselves to go there and to feel that, because then that is how the energy gets integrated. And then when that energy is integrated, we can feel more relaxed, we can feel more grounded, we can feel less reactive, we can feel like we can receive and offer love and that we can get shit done and even, of course, open up more spiritually. But because that part of us is so severed and so not lived and experienced in this lifetime, we've probably, most of us as men have experienced masculine fire as rage, as violence, as aggression, misplaced aggression, abuse, right? That's the unhealthy, distorted expression of masculine fire. Because as I said, masculine fire is the outward experience, right? Masculine fire is about going and shooting out into the world. So we've not learned the healthy, the integrated, or the conscious expression of masculine fire, which is actually very calm and loving and grounding and containing and safe and transformative. It's like it's pure transformation, it's pure transmutation. And it's not chaotic. It's not chaotic in the sense that we totally lose ourselves in the quote unquote fire. We surrender to the fire because we have to surrender in order to experience some form of ego death and to go beyond ourselves. When I say beyond ourselves, I mean beyond who we thought we were and what we thought we had to do, because that is the programming of the ego and the conditioning. But it's not chaotic. It's within the destruction that we're able to still hold space because we're not getting lost in the destruction. We're able to hold space, and then we can experience that wisdom, that enlightenment, that illumination that comes through after the process of let's say death and destruction, of thanatos. Thanatos is the opposite of eros. And eros, as I said in many episodes, is the force of creation, the force of charge, the force of vitality, primal charge of life, the aliveness that courses through everything, and it's love. That's eros. That's erotic fire, the fires of eros. So I will leave it here. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I think that's enough food for thought for today. I also wanted to say that today is basically 1 year since I've launched the podcast. I did launch last February on my birthday on the 20th. So it's been a year. I mean, today's the 19th, so it's basically a year since I launched. And I'm super excited. I'm super stoked to still be here and to still be putting out episodes. For those of you that have been with me since the beginning, thank you so much. I so appreciate your presence. There's been a few changes here and there, right? But I'm here and it's still happening and it's still going. And I have a few surprises coming up for Bridger of Worlds. So please stay tuned for those. For those of you on YouTube watching, please hit that like, subscribe, notification bell, leave a comment, share the video. All of that will really help me out. If you're on one of the podcast platforms, please rate the episode if you enjoyed it. Please rate the podcast if you enjoy it. Share the episode if you so feel called. You can send me a message. I'd love to hear from you. All my information as to how to contact me and work with me are in the YouTube description, as well as the podcast footers. We can work one-on-one through my website, templeoffire.card with two R's.co. You can schedule a 20-minute free call if you have some questions, or if you're just curious about how we can work together. Everything I bring to the space is up for grabs as far as masculine embodiment is concerned. You can also find me on Threads. It's really the only social media platform I am on at the moment. You can also find me on Substack if you enjoy reading. Great platform if you're looking for articles, and another platform to keep busy with. Over there, I post weekly writings as far as conscious sexuality is concerned, masculine, feminine energetics, porn addiction recovery, masculine embodiment, and all that good stuff. So I'd love to see you over there as well. I will be back next week, of course, with a brand new episode, as always, here every Thursday on Bridger of Worlds, Masculine Embodiment, Spiritual Awakening Podcast. And as always, please remember that you are the medicine and I'm just the messenger. Thank you very much.